Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We have an awesome spectrum of knowledge and experience based on both the hemp and the marijuana side of the marketplace. So hopefully you have a pretty interesting conversation here. I wanted to start real briefly. We only have 30 minutes, so I want to run down the line here and have each of our panelists introduce themselves and provide some background.
Thanks, Justin. My name is Bret Worley, CEO of Benzinga Nutraceuticals, the world's largest provider of cannabinoids.
Thanks, Justin. Keith Bushfield, CEO and President of Reactive Biotech.
Thanks, Justin. Norman Beerenbaum, former state cannabis regulator in Rhode Island and New York, and founding president of the Cannabis Regulators Association.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pamela, and I am the Chief Legal and Regulatory Officer for Terpene Belt. We are the largest steam-distilled hemp-derived terpene provider.
Thank you guys so much again for being here early this morning. We're going to leave some time for Q&A at the end, so please, if you have questions, be sure to participate, and if you don't have any, I'll pick some random people out, so I think that'll be the best case scenario. So, Bret, let's start with you. According to a Whitney Economics report, hemp-derived cannabinoid sales were greater than total legal sales of medical and adult use cannabis in 2022. Given this data, what advantages do you see the hemp market provides companies, investors, not present in the marijuana sector?
Yeah, the hemp market provides a unique dynamic where you can do interstate commerce. So, my company's based out of Denver, Colorado, and we're able to ship across the country, which allows us not to have multiple operations in multiple states, and also export to 30 countries, which we're currently in. So the hemp industry, including that it's federally legal, allows you to have more flexibility in your business model, allows you to adapt and adjust quicker than marijuana companies would typically be able to do with regulated frameworks. And additionally to that, on the consumer side, the consumer has the ease of access model where they can either order it online or see it in a gas station or smoke shop.
Great, thank you so much. Keith, your company's focused on the hemp beverages side. Do you think these particular consumption model provides advantages in terms of getting rid of stigma? How are you seeing consumers react to this product?
Yeah, without question, I think the biggest advantage that this hemp market is doing is it's allowing non-regular consumers of cannabis in the past to get into cannabis. So we're seeing the quote-unquote soccer mom that might never go into a dispensary because she feels uncomfortable there, that's not somewhere she want to go, where we're starting to see now they can go into a liquor store, which we provide. I think we're the largest distributor of hemp beverages in the country now, and you can go into now 17 or 18 states, go into a liquor store. It's sold right next to IPAs and import beers and things like that. It's age-gate. You can't buy it unless you're 21. That's our own internal rules. We're hoping that obviously frameworks start to develop that, but you basically are taking it out of what I call that fringe market and bringing it into that norm, I guess you might call it. So I think in the end, I think it's helping drive this industry, both on the marijuana side and the hemp, to be normalized and bring more clients to this business.
And are you positive reaction from distributors on the regular free tier system?
Yeah, everybody's finding their way right now. So we're starting to understand better. We're learning as much as everybody else is. But our distributors have seen sales of hemp beverages higher than a bunch of their alcohol sales. So I think in February in South Dakota we sold more hemp beverages than we did import beers, Modelo, Corona, etc. In Minnesota last month you saw increases over and above certain Cabernets and a bunch of other wine categories that are unprecedented. You're starting to see a big shift towards hemp beverages right now because it offers something an alternative, but it also gives these distributors other sources of revenue. So there's the tax implication that the revenue from the states are starting to make more taxes, and we have no problem with that. We want to expand it, make it so it's regulated for everybody, and we don't need the framework of cannabis just to do that. I think both sides can come together to make that better.
Thank you. Norm, given your vast experience on regulating marijuana in different states, what what do you see that states have gotten right on the marijuana side? Where can they improve? And then any insights as well on what states are doing with hemp-derived cannabinoids?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. And I'll just say, because I have to, that my comments and thoughts are mine and mine alone, informed by my past work at the state level and through the Cannabis Regulators Association. I am not speaking on behalf of any federal agency or part of the U.S. federal government, and any comment shouldn't be attributed to them. So we'll get that out of the way. Check the box on the day job. You know, it's been a very, very interesting thing to see both the establishment of state, you know, regulated structures and requirements for marijuana, and then to see the emergence of the hemp industry, and to see, you know, where are there similarities, where are there differences, where should there be parity in terms of regulatory structures made for product standards as opposed to the differences in the supply chain or around, you know, wholesale and retail distribution, because you don't have these closed loop siloed markets, right? So on the marijuana side, there are a lot of lessons that were learned early on. If you look at the first several years of, you know, Oregon, Colorado, Washington, you know, early medical programs, and when you look at packaging, when you look at labeling, when you look at serving differentiation or individual wrapping or scoring, you look at, you know, cannabinoid content limits that were put in place, right? You can go back 10 years and say, oh, maybe it wasn't a good idea to put 1,000 milligrams in a baked good and say on the label, just nibble the corner, and then try it again, you know, 20, 30 minutes later, right? And so those were lessons that, you know, we learned, but they were learned, and they were learned at a cost. Luckily, you know, when you had those adverse events that happened because of that lack of, you know, regulatory comprehensive regulatory framework over those products and those standards, the people who, you know, had issues with it were relatively small number, because you had distribution that was only through dispensaries, right, or it was only through a medical program. But if you look at what states have done, for the most part, states have a very consistent model when it comes to, you know, packaging, labeling, product standards, routes of administration, dosing, warnings, labeling, things like that. And then also states have this, you know, bedrock of the Cole Memo as well, right? So that their regulatory structures, their intrastate markets, all really stem from Cole Memo priorities back from, you know, when that was really kind of the guiding light for what states were doing. You layer on what's happening now in hemp, and, you know, it comes online about a decade later. You know, it is a very, very different situation, even though you have a lot of the same molecules, right? So we're seeing products that are out there now that have levels of cannabinoids in them, intoxicating cannabinoids, that would never be allowed in the adult use market, right? They are not labeled so that the consumer knows what's in them. They're not clearly identified, and, you know, you've seen adverse events kind of spike across the country. And so now states, over the last 2 years, are putting in place their own regulatory requirements and structures for hemp-derived products. And a lot of them are consolidating the regulatory oversight and authority within their existing cannabis regulator. You look at Washington, you look at Oregon, you look at Maryland, you look at what happened in New York, because they're saying, listen, interstate commerce aside, you know, the fact that you can buy these products online or, you know, through less formal, you know, brick and mortar retail outlets, we still need to have parity in terms of the safety standards, because those lessons that were learned at a cost back then will be learned tenfold when you talk about national market, national distribution, kind of the lack of oversight that we see, you know, as the market has grown and emerged. So, you know, that's a little bit of the difference there. And, you know, to some extent, as Bret said, there are a lot of benefits economically in terms of, you know, consolidated manufacturing and scale distribution, the activities you can have for, you know, interstate commerce on the hemp side. But the regulatory certainty, I think, is, you know, in question more so than what's already in place in state for the marijuana side. And it's hard to claim that there's, you know, regulatory certainty anywhere in the cannabis sector, right? I know people will laugh at that, but there are, you know, kind of entrenched regulatory structures and approaches that states have done and copied from each other that now are being kind of completely rewritten and altered when it comes to hemp. So you have the same patchwork, and it can be problematic.
And we have, I think everyone's waiting on this, was the 23 Farm Bill, now it's the 24 Farm Bill, and it might be the 25 Farm Bill. And that's obviously kind of a fork in the road for both sides of the industry. We're seeing some tension there and friction on that definition of hemp. So any insights on what may happen there?
I mean, only to say that I have no insights on the farm bill. I think we're all, you know, waiting with bated breath. But whether things fall in or outside of the definition of hemp, there's a huge market that is there right now. It's going to be very, very difficult to take a prohibitionist approach to get all that toothpaste back in the tube. And if you're looking to create regulatory certainty for the industry, right, and regulatory certainty for consumers, for public health and safety, and consistency of products across jurisdiction, regulatory certainty for all the firms and businesses that are operating, so they can deploy capital and we can have more innovation in research, right, and R&D. It's not going to come necessarily from just a farm bill fix, right? The farm bill, changes to the farm bill will not provide the comprehensive regulatory structure or the type of regulatory certainty that's needed. It won't provide the type of, I think, guiding light to the states and all of their regulatory approaches that we have seen, elsewhere for marijuana.
Thank you so much. Pamela, any insights you can provide to investors in effectively evaluating the investment opportunity and a company's long-term sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's interesting is Terpene Belt sits in a unique perch, right? We've really been talking about hemp-derived cannabinoid products, I think, to this point. And as a company that does a non-cannabinoid hemp-derived input, it's a really unique place to sit because when we as a raw input provider are also looking for our partners, we want to make sure that they're producing a high quality product and that there's long-term sustainability. That is achieved through understanding the safety data and the toxicology behind these new products that are coming out. And when you're doing that as an investor, you want to know what is their long-term plan? What is their legislation plan? As we've talked about, the Farm Bill is precarious, we don't have a lot of certainty. That means that you're doing the work to educate the regulators, the legislators, the people, the consumer as well. And in order to do that, you want to have independent validation. You want to ensure that there is insurance coverage, that they have a plan. What happens? How do you embrace the power of the pivot in order to move with the changing tides? It is actually, I would contend, more difficult to be a multi-state hemp cannabinoid producer than it is to be a multi-state hemp or multi-state cannabis operator, because you have more certainty within packaging, labeling, advertising restrictions. So those are the things you want to look at in order to ensure that your investment is sound in the short term and the long term.
So I have a question for the panel. Marijuana versus hemp. Where did marijuana get it wrong, and where did hemp get it right? We've seen hemp, grow at 3 or 4 times the rate of marijuana, being a bigger market now. Did a state's framework like Tennessee that is 25 milligrams and 500 for adjustables and no cap on inhalables, is that the right market? What are the panel's thoughts on, one, why did hemp grow so quickly, and second is, what is the right regulatory framework?
Well, if nobody goes, I'll go. What did marijuana get wrong? I don't know if I would look at it what we got wrong. You learn your most lessons from the challenges. It's more, where can we cut the fat? How do you get to an efficient, effective regulatory system that isn't based out of fear? And a lot of that is just about over-taxation, over-regulation, right? A hemp registration is so much easier than a license that burdens you from hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars before you transact a dollar. So that we want to bring in to the hemp side, and we want hemp to be able to be that steward that unlocks descheduling. Then we need to do it with a sense of responsibility to the consumer and make sure that they have the awareness to make good decisions. Risk mitigation, liability mitigation. Put the information on the package that's necessary. Don't be afraid of the word intoxicating. We are all selling an intoxicant. Alcohol is an intoxicant. It's not a scary word. It's an honest integrity. So if we meet in the middle, in the regulated, sensible regulation with pillars of cannabinoid safety, I like to think of them as the 3 Ps, right? Process, purity, potency. And if you're able to check off all of those buckets, you're able to bring a responsible product to market and that will allow regulators to give you light touch regulation. So investing in your compliance, in track and trace, in making sure you have recall plans, all of that is necessary, and those are the good pieces of what marijuana has done. California gets a bad rap a lot of the times. I'm going to give it a really important shout out. It probably has one of the best regulatory regimes for manufactured products because it's rooted in CGMP. And I know a lot of the very good hemp operators are also rooted in CGMP. So that's like one nexus flashpoint that if we get closer to the middle, cut out some fat from the regulated marijuana side and build in better frameworks on the hemp side from public health and safety. And there you go, that's the framework.
Oh, I was just gonna say, again, were you talking about, regulatory structure in terms of market architecture for the market? Or are we talking about regulatory structure for the products themselves? I mean, you provide some examples around, both age gating, but also, the content in the product, right? I think that this is a slightly more nuanced conversation than what is the number? What's the number that's allowed, right? If you have proper child-resistant packaging, then maybe that number goes up. If you have proper warnings, maybe that number goes up. If you have an identifying symbol on the product that clearly differentiates it from something that's not intoxicating, maybe that number goes up. If you have products that don't look just like commercially available cereals and candies, which are, marketed to children, right? Then maybe that goes up. I think the challenge that we're seeing right now and what states are contending with is people don't want to paint with a broad brush, but because of interstate commerce and because of direct e-commerce and direct-to-consumer, distribution through online sales and using the postal service, these products, without any of those safeguards, without those common sense kind of regulations and guardrails, are everywhere. And so, I think it's more of a nuanced conversation. We also need to understand that the modern hemp market right now has cannabinoids and compounds which are not naturally occurring in the plant, which the plant is not capable of producing, right? If you were going to do a market scan of all the intoxicating cannabinoids and products that are out there, you'd probably find a little over 24 cannabinoids which are being sold for their intoxicating properties right now. That's why the consumers are purchasing them. That's certainly their right. But a lot of these cannabinoids are cannabinoids that did not exist on the face of the earth a year ago. There's no history of human interaction. There's no human experience with the use of them. There's no experience with, well, what's the difference between ingesting them as opposed to aerosolizing them? And one of the things we haven't talked about, and beverages are, a wonderful, medium and route of administration, but there's very, very serious considerations when it comes to inhalable products. It was not that long ago. People forget about it because it was right before COVID, but we had another, respiratory crisis across the country where otherwise healthy 20, 30, and 40-year-olds were dying on respirators and ventilators because of the Uvalde outbreak, right? And so, I think it's understanding that framework where you have different stakeholders and different state regulators that are saying, no, we need parity here. We, had to address this in our marijuana products in the wake of Uvalde. Let's make sure the safeguards are now in place for hemp products. And so, we haven't talked about testing either yet, right? So, testing for mold and microbial contamination, testing for heavy metals, testing for residual solvents, right? Testing to make sure that there's accurate cannabinoid content on the label. If we can inform consumers so that they have confidence in these products, that's going to help the industry. That's going to make sure that we're not seeing the types of adverse events that have occurred out there. I mean, that's going to help everyone. So I think there are some parts of the marijuana regulatory structure that, from a product standard requirement or aspect, have gone very well, and it's kind of a no-brainer to apply those to hemp products generally, and that's what we're seeing states do now. But the other questions of, well, what is that number if you address all those other things? Not hearing a lot of people saying, yes, we should address those other things. Everyone's saying, yeah, we shouldn't sell it to kids. It's a hard argument to make and sell it to kids, right? Everyone's saying age gate. Everyone's saying let's have an accurate label. But, under what regulatory structure are you going to account for all those other aspects? That's kind of the question.
Thanks, Norm. I think a big part of it too is you're going to have bad actors in every industry. It doesn't matter who it is. Obviously, we need a regulatory framework to help everybody be on par. And I don't think there's anybody that's doing this right would argue with that, any of that. As an example, with what we do, if you come to one of the booths over there and look at one of our cans that we produce for whoever it is, beverage, there are enough warnings on there that, you know, I think we go above and beyond even what the regulatory framework for cannabis would be in California and so forth. You know, our compliance department's attitude is let's have every single warning we possibly can put on those cans, and we put it out there, even if we don't need it, even if we're not required. So I think that has to happen across the board. So, you know, whether it's regulated by each state or individual, we have to do that. It's just mandatory to make sure this moves forward. But one of the things that I think Bret, you said earlier that I wanted to say is one of the big things that the hemp industry has done is innovate. And I think we've been faster in innovating on the hemp side. I play on both sides. We have a ton of clients that are in the regulated cannabis space, I would call it, across the United States, and we have a whole bunch that are in the hemp side. And we can see innovation far faster on the hemp side, which also helps over to the cannabis side. We've innovated on the hemp side, and then we've brought that technology to the regulated cannabis side. So again, I don't think anybody's, I get where people get upset. They had this crazy license that they paid, which I think is ridiculous, and why it isn't growing as fast as it is. We don't live in an economy that has monopolies. We live in an economy that's free market economy, and that's how it should be driven. So if we all get together, put the right framework in place, the hemp is going to help the cannabis will help the hemp.
Obviously not ideal for businesses to operate, you know, state by state, patchwork of regulations. And I think we'd all agree we'd love to have some sort of federal minimum consumer safety floor that provides guidance to, you know, not just companies but also investors on being able to identify who's doing it right and who's not doing it the right way. We have about 7.5 minutes. Do we have any questions from the audience? Sure. We got a mic coming here.
Thanks. My name is Brian Sakanik. Over the last year, I've invested about $3 million on the cannabis side. Irony is, yesterday I was visiting my son. He's up in Palm Beach in a rehab for hemp-derived THC. And I know you're all talking about the regulatory framework, but I live up by West Point, New York, and all the kids just go into every single gas station, sells the hemp-derived stuff. And I asked the authorities to get involved, and there's no law. You can sell this to, I understand the packaging. And I'm afraid this is going to blow up in our faces, I reckon, for everyone, because all the kids are just going to the store and buying everything. You know, again, like my wife's furious with me because, you know, I'm investing in the business. You know, I'm here today, and my son's up here in rehab. And it just seems like, how are we going to close that gap? So, because it's a huge problem. And how do we stop that selling to the kids in all these gas stations?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's an important problem. We are looked at and will be as the cannabinoid industry. Source shouldn't matter, and at the end of the day, just like, you know, tech is run fast and break things, we all have seen the Elizabeth Holmes story, that is not what you do with public health and safety. And I think this is an inflection point and a moment to address your concern, where the good operators have to be stewards, and we have to come together as the cannabinoid industry to address these issues. And it goes back to when I was talking about pure process, purity, potency. There does not need to be the sale, or at least this is my personal opinion, of cannabinoids that are binding affinities are higher than Delta-9. Without proper warning, labeling, total intoxicating cannabinoid content, disclaimer, and also, whereas we're talking about beverages being in over 21, that's not currently the prevailing requirement in hemp, and hemp can be sold everywhere. So while we have this very wide continuum in hemp, because remember, there are non-cannabinoid hemp derivatives. We don't want to say all hemp-derived products need to be 21 plus, but we need to address the compound and the part of the plant that creates that particular issue is cannabinoids. and start acting responsibly and honestly having consume responsibly in conversations at home with kids. What are these cannabinoids? Why shouldn't you use them at this stage of your life? Because until we get our arms around this problem, they are going to be readily available. So there needs to be a much larger conversation. It's also why I said don't be afraid of the word intoxicating. Because if we're honest and authentic in that conversation, it will hopefully prevent the access while the regulation catches up to the proliferation of the products, because consumers do desire them. So there's a nexus point between consumer desirability and responsible consumption and access.
I want to get to the next question, but I just want to clarify that there's 3 markets of marijuana. There's the regulated cannabis market, there's the regulated hemp market, and then there's the black market. The New York stores that are selling products willy-nilly would be the black market, and those same bodegas or stores, you can buy other controlled substances that are very harmful. So I just want to clarify that those products would not be legal in New York.
Well, a lot of those products are on the shelf because people say they're Farm Bill compliant. So, you know.
But New York also regulates those products, so they'd be illegal in New York State specifically.
100%, but it's
Sure,
not
but
just in New York.
there are more than 24 states now that have taken action to put in place a regulatory framework where products and gas stations would comply. So, you know, is it federally legal? Is it legal under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act as opposed to the CSA? And is it state legal? Well, it very much depends on the state, but the vast majority of products, I mean, you can go to Louisiana at a gas station and get a hemp product that says on the label, not for sale in the state of Louisiana. Right? So this is what we're talking about in terms of regulatory certainty. But sir, you bring up a wonderful point, an important point, and I think to have progress in this space, whether you're an operator, whether you're an investor, you have to do your due diligence. You can't do your due diligence unless you understand what is actually happening out there, right? If you believe Whitney Economics estimates, you've got upwards of a $28 billion industry of cannabinoids. Only 10% of that is CBD, where that used to be the prevailing motivating factor for people to get into this cannabinoid space. It's only 10% of the market now per his analysis. The 2018 Farm Bill was December of 2018, so it was really the 2019 Farm Bill. Then it took a year and a half for things to really mature. So we're talking about an industry the size of craft beer in this country springing up over 2.5, 3 years. How does that happen if it's not in gas stations and convenience stores and online? So the growth is tremendous, right? If you're looking to invest, this is honestly something you're going to look at. You should also understand that there's a SAMHSA study that came out about a month ago that says now 11% of high school seniors have used Delta 8, right? And it's the first time they asked the question, but that is a really big number for high schoolers to be using this, right? And it's also, per the study, underreported because they're not asking about HHC or Delta 10 or THCAO or THCJD or hydroxy-11 THC or all these other cannabinoids, many of which, again, zero known safety profile. So, these are the conversations that we need to have to make sure that people understand what the issues are, right? It's not going to be just about a number. It's not going to be about one cannabinoid. It's not going to be just about age gaming. It's going to be all these different factors.
Norm, I'm from Indiana. We're an island of prohibition on adult use or medical. We're surrounded by states with it, right? We're getting direct mail pieces now from these companies sent to residences to come over to the border and purchase, right? And our General Assembly's been reluctant to even put age restrictions on products like Delta 8 THC. You can walk into a gas station and be 12 years old and legally purchase it. So, it takes education and it takes effort to understand that. To your point earlier, prohibition is not going to do anything to protect consumer safety or consumer health.
Yeah, that same survey said that, okay, in states that actually have passed some type of regulatory structure or approach to hemp-derived products, that number of high school senior use goes from 11% down to I think around 5 or 6%. For states that don't, it creeps up to 15%, right? So states that are taking a regulatory approach here, you're seeing that reflected at least in some of the youth access and some of the youth use patterns that are starting to emerge. We need better surveillance, right? These are not definitive numbers. It's the first time they did it. It was a subset, but this is something we need surveys on. It's something we need to understand the market. We also need to understand the public health impacts and what's happening with vulnerable populations.
getting the wrap up signal. Maybe one more question. I'm gonna get kicked out of here.
Zero
but-
questions.
Oh, zero questions. Sorry.
Sorry, Greg.
Round of applause for our panel. Thank you guys for being here this morning.